Welcome, everyone, to another edition of 45 Forward, where our mission is to help you, our listeners from Los Angeles to Long Island, make your second half of life even better than the first. Almost 2 years into this shape-shifting pandemic, the disruption of our daily lives seems to be finally easing. And yet, we still feel anxious and stressed out, dealing with the cumulative impact of the virus on so many aspects of our lives. So how do we move forward, making life better, even when we worry that the eventual new normal may result in a more subdued and uncertain life? In today's episode, Lesa Kingsbury, the director of the Amba Yoga Center, and Ken Taub, a veteran writer grounded in Eastern philosophy, who also has led meditation workshops, will talk about how aspects of these practices can help us deal with life's anxieties, feelings of isolation, and fear, made all the more prevalent in these uncertain times. Lesa and Ken will speak about various techniques and tools like breathing, how to stay present in one's emotions, quietly aware of how they change moment to moment, rather than being perpetually reactive. Each will offer their views on how we can take unique moments to focus on life's important details that we often miss when we're consumed by multitasking, whipsawed by the daily overload of news and information. They'll reflect too on the power of stillness, truly an anathema in contemporary American culture, and how it can be restorative, healing, a great form of rebalancing in a very out of balance times. Ken and Lesa will offer their perspectives on simple, practical routines we can integrate into a less rushed life. They'll also offer some thoughts on some other approaches in the field of mindfulness, stress reduction, and relaxation, an arena that has exploded in recent years, entering the mainstream of health, medicine, and business. And yes, as part of this Valentine's Day episode, Ken and Lesa, who are husband and wife, will talk about how they have remained mindful of love and their relationship, not only in a time of COVID, but over a lifetime. So now let's once again meet Lesa Kingsbury and Ken Taub. Welcome back to both of you.
Thank you, Ron.
Hey, Ron. Good to see you.
Yeah. So it's good to see you guys again. It's the last time you were on the show was February 8th of last year, almost a year into the pandemic. You offered many insights into relationships between yoga and meditation, how we could use these practices. So a year later, of course, we've discovered that many of the pressures and anxieties, they're still here. They may have shifted somewhat, but there's no going back to BC before COVID, right? Now it's AD, another dimension, but we're not sure what that dimension is. But whatever it is, it's time to move forward through and out of this trauma and beyond. So basically, that's what I wanted to focus with you guys on today. If people would like to review some of your basic tenets, they can go back to last year's show. We have it in our archive, and there are many great insights. They can look at that. But today, I want you to talk to you guys about, again, 45 forward. Before we dive into a little bit more about the general practices, how did you guys do this last year? What was some of the ways you navigated this time, and yourself use your own techniques or practices, and what things did you see in terms of the changing perspectives personally? Lesa, you want to start, and then Ken?
Sure. Yeah. I think that for me, because yoga is my primary practice, I would always go back to my practice and give myself permission to ebb and flow with it. Because some days we want to do things that we know that are good for us, and other days we don't. But all in all, just touching base with that practice grounds me. And so I'm more present in my body, because when you stretch and when you move, you're not in your head. And that's part of the problem I find with times of stress or crisis is you run off with your thoughts in your head. And then even deeper than that is just your breath, because you're talking about practices and everything. I find that when I'm not on my yoga mat, in order to deal with some of the waves of emotion or disappointment or excitement, is just always returning to the breath.
Right. How about you, Ken?
Well, with COVID in the background and still with us for 2021, we got out, and we still do. We got outside as often as we could. We have a dog, our dear Abby, and we walk her once or twice a day, unless it's a downpour or a blizzard, and we'll take her to the field. So we're big on getting out. We traveled a bit. We went to Colorado in June, and we got to be outdoors big time. Nature has been a big salve for us. Everything from hiking out west to feeding the birds on the back deck in the morning. So that makes for some sanity.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
COVID is real. COVID has taken far too many people. It's still going on. But no matter what's going on in news or natural disasters or a global pandemic, it's a very big, wonderful world. And even little reminders of how big and beautiful the world is, I find to be very helpful as well as healthy.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I think that, we've known each other quite some time. Actually going back to high school, but and recently we discovered that both of us are feeding the birds. I had a previous show with right around the Christmas Audubon count with a woman named Yoko Chu, who is a director of communications at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I really appreciated her comments and her observations. I'm a birder, and I think that getting out, as you said, Ken, for me, getting out in nature, and I think that part of what we've struggled with is that COVID has disrupted our sense of connectedness to the world, and in some ways to ourselves. We've lost the connection to ourselves. So, for me, getting out in nature and just witnessing the fact that what, we are connected in ways. Things are bigger than ourselves. And it's been a struggle because I think that, as you guys have pointed out previously, the COVID has sort of, it for a while, it literally made the world smaller for us. We were in isolation. And yet there are advantages to the world being smaller, to sort of helping narrow your focus. And this is something that I think that, so what are the benefits of a smaller world? Because small can be beautiful. So Ken, talk a little bit more about that as to how you've used that focus to really, in terms of being mindful of yourself and the world around you.
For myself, I look at it this way. We're in the Northeast. We're on Long Island. It is February. It is the middle of winter, and life gets much smaller for most of us, unless you're an alpine skier or such, in the winter than it does in the spring and the summer and the fall. And so it's a time where you can have a more limited focus, and the things that you do focus on can be deeper. You can slow down. Much of nature slows down for winter, and it's not bad when we do too. When you're parents, you're still parents. When you're working, you're still working. But a more targeted focus can make life richer and sometimes just easier.
Yeah, I think that, and it's tough to do. I mean, this notion of sitting still and being still is tough, and and in some cases being still, but also being physically active. So there's a relationship to yoga as well, right, Lesa?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that what I like to say to many people is, if you can't sit still, try yoga, because then you can start to slow down in that regard. But after what Ken had mentioned, I was thinking that walking is perfect, because when you walk, there's a certain rhythm to it. And as you get into that rhythm, then there's almost a soothing constant, like the thrum of a wheel of a bicycle. I like to also go out and ride bicycles, but that thrum and that beat and that rhythm can help us slow down, because there's a constant sound. Like if you do breathing practices, right? There's a constant sound of the Ujjayi breath. and it just captures the mind. So when it's ready to run away with you, you just have something that's constantly moving at a beat. And then whatever else is going on around you, whether it's the atmosphere of bird watching or looking outdoors at a great vista, you know, you can start to just exhale. Because I think too many of us just hold our breath. It's like we're just waiting for this whole thing to end, and it's just not going to end. It's about how do we integrate it back in to our lives and living in a slightly different fashion, so that no matter what happens, you know, you develop these tools or these things that'll take you out of your head and just into your body.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that, you know, you don't, you know, with these are stressful times. And I find myself realizing that as I'm going through these periods or I'm working on something, I realize how shallow my breath has gotten, you know, and it's, you know, and this is the normal stress, you know, response, right? That's sort of the flight or fight syndrome of, you know, dealing with anxiety. So you shorten your breath to really deal with this, but you've got to, need an intervention, or you got to stop yourself and say, wait a minute, take a deep breath. And it's, um, and there is a certain interesting, for me, I don't want to say irony, but basically, you know, when you slow down and kind of get inward, it basically brings you outward. You know, I found that, you know, we have someone who comes in now once a week. I'm taking a note of lessons from you, and I have someone come in and with my wife and myself, and does yoga once a week in our basement. And I was lying there, and you know, I realized, you know, people talk about yoga, you know, the typical, well, I'm really inflexible. I need to get, you know, I need to touch my toe. What's the matter with me? And yes, it's true in our sitting economy, right? You need to really get up and your hips get locked up. But I noted that I was feeling like, you know, the breathing, you know, I felt that it was not just flexibility, it was really opening up, you know, the body to be more flexible overall, you know. And I guess that's a form of mindfulness, right, Ken? I mean, when you're integrating both the physical and the mental that way.
Sure. And much of the time, or after a time, it happens by itself, as it were. And you may or may not be aware of it. When you're aware of it, you're happy for yourself, you're proud of yourself. But everything tends to happen on its own,
Hmm.
uh, not unlike the weather. And most of the time, we're not doing things to make it happen. Most of the time, we're getting in the way of
Right.
it. And so getting out of the way and getting out of one's own way is really what any sort of practice is about. I have to say that I'm not a low energy person who sits in meditation often. I have been a high energy person. I like swimming and running. I still go to the gym. And that I have not given up. I cannot give up. Um, I've gone to the gym often with the mask on, but I'm still going. So if I can walk outside, if I can go swimming, if I can go for a vigorous hike, if I can go to the gym, I'm a very, very happy guy. And I'm not even thinking about de-stressing or getting out of my head. I'm just doing. And I realize, certainly after all this time, stuff tends to happen by itself. And if I'm better at anything, it's getting out of my own way sometimes.
Like, a worthy effort.
Worthy effort.
Yeah, I think right. I think, well, I do think that we are in a society that's impatient, right? So giving ourselves a chance to slow down, you know, as I mentioned in the intro, is kind of anathema to our society.
Yeah.
I think that we're getting there. I think, you know, now we have some research, right, that basically is pretty good evidence that we're never really multitasking. You know, we're doing a bunch of things in quick, rapid succession, but the mind really is just focusing on one thing at a time very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
So I think
I
that
think
there,
after the Ed Sullivan show, where the guy would come out in the unicycle and be juggling a bowling ball, a chainsaw, and a
right.
couple of pigeons, after that guy, most of us were not multitasking too well.
That's right. That's right. And with the exception of the other guy who came out with like 10 spinning the 10 platters, right?
Right.
Eventually they break. They just do. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I think that there's, but it takes some doing to slow ourselves down, and I think so I think there's a certain prejudice, if you will, against slowing down and being still and taking these moments almost like, well, that's a waste of time.
Mm.
That's, I could be doing something during the time. And
Mm.
in fact, I think you're less productive in that time. And I think your body really needs that kind of, attention, your mind and body together.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Um,
This is 45. This is 45 forward, and it's really about the second half of life.
mhm.
And one has a certain inertia and energy and exploration in your teens and your 20s and your 30s. And now there's a sense of, under normal circumstances, of just appreciation. And little things become great because you realize that there's a limit in time and to our lives. And so things that we just took for granted, we don't take for granted anymore. And for us, the pandemic was even more of an opportunity to appreciate things.
Right.
Things that that seemed no big deal, that we took for granted.
Right. So I'm going to just hold on to that thought. We'll continue. We're going to take a quick break. But folks, when we come back, we'll be talking much more about mindfulness, yoga, meditation, and COVID with Lesa Kingsbury and Ken Taub. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi, folks. We're talking with Ken Taub and Lesa Kingsbury about how yoga, meditation, and mindfulness can help us during and beyond the pandemic to the endemic, whatever that might be. Before we continue, I wanted to let you know that you can find out more information about Ken and Lesa on my Roel Resources website, roelresources.com. Just click on the 45 forward tab. You could also go on my website to take my retirement mentality quiz, 25 questions that will tell you how prepared you are for the second half of life. And you can also find out more about Amba Yoga by logging on to ambayoga.com, ambayoga.com. So, guys, before the break, we were talking about how to create a hard stop in life to basically when you need to really unplug. So, Lesa, we were talking about that during the break. Why don't we refresh that conversation?
Sure. The whole thing about this shutdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic and the shutdown is I was forced into not being out there as much. Obviously, I couldn't teach in person, couldn't do much of anything. And there was almost a relief that I didn't have to make sure that I stopped my busyness. I think all of us have this wheel, or this hamster wheel, if you will, that we've got to get it done, got to get it done, got to get it done. I don't know if it's the Puritan ethic or what. So in our mind, we're already programmed to not slow down until we crash.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo migraines, or people having various illnesses that make them stop. So the trick is, and you had mentioned breath too. You wanted to talk a little bit more about breath.
Right.
The trick is it's individual, but it's also universal, that if you tune into your breath, you can begin to slow down. It's the best thing if you're in a argument, to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to feel your body. So sometimes I'll say, find your feet, feel your breath, and then continue, because that forced stop was great, because I didn't realize how fast I was running. So many classes, doing the planning, having a household, you have your day-to-day responsibilities, let alone when we were raising our son when he was at home. But there are different breathing techniques that can quickly bring you down from a very excitable state. And the easiest thing to remember is that if you want to calm down, make your exhalation longer than your inhalation. slow down your breath so that you can fill your lungs more easily. Sit upright so there's space to fill your lungs, because most of us sit like this, right? So you're collapsing into your lungs when you're shrunken over. And most of us have bad posture because of reaching forward on the computer pad.
Right.
You know, to sit up and lift your sternum and press into your feet when you're sitting in a chair and grounding your buttock bones, everything starts to open up. And then the body responds to that by breathing more deeply. And then your mind responds by taking on, again, like I talked about before, the rhythm, so that there's this constant hum in the background that might slow down, so that you don't have to crash and burn.
Right.
And that's the problem with my prior life, is constantly crashing and burning.
Right.
But for an individual who's never done yoga, never done meditation, it seems like, oh yeah, yoga is like one of those things, as you were saying, well, I have to touch my toes to do yoga, and you don't, right?
Right.
Or I have to sit on the floor, but I can't sit on the floor because my knees don't work, so I won't try meditation. You know, we have all these constructs in our mind about how to basically stop before we even start.
Right.
So finding something simple is key. That's what I say to all the people that start with me, is just find something simple.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that, in my discussions with you, Ken, I mean, I think that, you've taught, meditation, mindfulness. Yeah. I know that it's kind of a buzzword now, but I do like the term mindfulness, because I think it really, is a little bit broader and incorporates an overall, sensibility about life, as opposed to a specific practice. And how do you apply mindfulness in your general life?
Well, mindfulness is not just awareness, it's a different caliber of alertness.
Right.
Excuse me. We can be alert to danger. Most of us have been of some form of heightened alert during this global pandemic. But you can also be alert and so aware to what's happening right in front of you. And when you have a very different relationship with it. You're holding it in a different kind of awareness than just being reactive. So rather than making mindfulness something mystical or mysterious, it is just really stopping enough through a breath, through a moment of quiet. You don't have to sit in meditation for 20 or 30 minutes and saying, wait a minute. And, an adult version of counting to 5 or 10, and looking what's right in front of you. And when you do, things shift. The scenery hasn't shifted. You shifted. And the more you do it, the easier it is to do. So I guess part of the theme of what we're talking about is expansion and contraction. And the pandemic has, for most people, squeezed or contracted their lives. So under these extraordinary circumstances, how do you live a more expansive life? And that's not external, that's internal. We can go out for walks, you can go to Colorado or the beach somewhere when the weather is nice. But how do you expand in the moment? And there are various ways to do that. And so it's also a question you ask yourself. Am I living smaller and more contracted, or am I doing something that's enlarging me and expanding my life? And the first step is even just asking that simple question. And then when you feel like you're living smaller, then you ask yourself, okay, what should I do differently now? Or what should I just do now?
Right, right. Yeah, I think that, one of the things that we've discussed before, I think too, is, what are the expectations of the use of these tools? And I think sometimes, we're solution oriented in terms of trying to prevent things from happening, or trying to eliminate things. And I think that, we've talked before about the fact that these are tools to help you live better, but they don't eliminate problems in life. These things are here, and I think that in one of my previous podcasts, interviewing a guy named John Leland, who wrote a book called Happiness is a Choice We Make. It was based on interviews with people who were 85 and older. And one of the things he discovered with them was that people who were happy, he used a phrase, in spite of, as opposed to if only.
Right.
So you're happy if only these things were out here, if only this wasn't true, if only I had this. And they were like, there's always going to be stuff, how to maintain a sense of fulfillment in spite of all these things, and really, with them right next to you. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a whole flurry of things that are coming in. We talked about how, well, Ken just mentioned how COVID makes your world really small, and we've all experienced that. And how do you find a way to live larger within that restriction? So the first thing is that I thought of is, how often do we say, I don't have enough room, I don't have enough room, I don't have enough room, as opposed to, well, where can I go? Like, if you've seen water make its way into everywhere. And unfortunately, if you've ever had a flood in your basement or a small leak, it's like water gets everywhere. So what we want to do is make some kind of space so that we can let that trickle down effect and find a crack in the concrete so that we can just expand out through it. And it's not necessarily that we make our lives larger, but we just make more space for our thoughts, for our breath. You were talking about in and out, and that expansion and contraction. And there's always going to be something next down the pike that's extremely joyful or extremely challenging or very sad. I mean, that's the whole process of life. But sometimes we don't know that. And once we realize it, then we could say, oh, wait a minute. How do we get around this bend? Or how do I negotiate this roadblock? And not be so caught up in the story, if you will. It's like, well, damn it, I don't have this, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. It's like, well, what do I have? Flip it on the other side. Find another way to look at it.
And I think that, go ahead, Ken.
Ron. No, you go.
No, I was going to ask you a question. So, but basically about, we were talking about, how do you cope with these things? And I think that you said before about, well, letting things happen. So I think there is this notion that you've mentioned about, things will happen, but you can react to them in the sense of they don't affect you as much. You're not under their thumb.
Right. Absolutely. Well, things always keep happening.
Right.
We put ourselves in we put ourselves in the center of things that we want to, or that have nothing to do with us. Much of life is putting ourselves in the center of almost everything. But it need not be that way. You hit on something a little bit earlier, Ron, is that we're looking for a solution. And this thing, if we do this thing, if we go hiking or we do yoga or we do meditation, it'll make us better. It'll make us more fit, more metaphysically fit. And it may or may not. And often just it does not. But we're always looking for the next thing. For example, we're all waiting for the pandemic to become endemic. And it will or it won't, and it will in 6 months, or it will in 6 years. We're always waiting for something. And then it'll be okay. And of course, it won't be any better. It'll just be different good and different bad.
Right.
Exactly.
So, the great philosopher Jimmy Durante said, "These are the conditions that prevail." Right. This is where we are right now. This is where we are in our lives, and this is where we are in the pandemic. And I'm not making light of it. A lot of people have gotten seriously ill. A lot of people are long haulers. We lost far too many people. It disrupted a lot of lives and a lot of businesses. But here we are. I mean, here we are in winter. Here we are in our lives, and things are not going to get better. You know, like Zorba the Greek said, you know, when asked about his life and why he was so happy, well, he said, "Here we are in the full catastrophe," and it's always the full catastrophe, and here we are living it. So we make choices during a pandemic and in a rainstorm and otherwise, and not waiting for it to get better or for ourselves to get better.
Right.
It won't get better.
Right.
This is it.
Right. Well, some things may get better, but as you said, you know, it is what it is. And I think that, you know, I think that the pandemic has showed us that really it's it's heightened a sense of what's going on in life. You know, a lot of things were there all along, but it's brought certain focus on certain things. But it is what it is, and you can, you know, it made us pay attention to some things we weren't aware of. I don't think
Right.
we were aware of the potential, how quickly people could get isolated from each other, and how, especially for people who were older, you know, how they were, you know, how society was set up so that they were basically isolated with no means of support. So that was true before the pandemic, but it basically brought it to light in a very uncomfortable and disturbing way. Um, and I think too that it did show, you know, that we had lost a sense of stillness, you know, lost a sense of how to breathe, and that we needed to bring ourselves back into somewhat of a balance with this. And I think it's one of the things that I do appreciate is I think that, you know, these ideas of meditation and mindfulness and yoga and the connection between, you know, body and mind are becoming more mainstream. You know, it's not, you know, I think when you started studying Eastern philosophy, people thought like, whoa, what's Ken doing? You know, where I don't think, I think people appreciate now, you know, the deeper connections in life, and they're coming into the mainstream. You know, as I mentioned before, you know, when, you know, there is a lot more focus on relaxation techniques and stress reduction. And some of this is for, you know, commercial purposes. I recognize that. But there is a certain appreciation, I think, that it's coming into the mainstream and being considered part of traditional medicine, in fact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember reading about 25 years ago that there was a meditation room in the Pentagon. And I said, okay, you don't get more mainstream than that.
Right, right.
But I think also there's always a counterpoint to life. And has been so much change over the last 25 years that a part of all of us feels, wait, slow down, stop the world. It's changing so fast every 6 months.
That you can't keep up with it.
Yes, and you feel like you can't keep up with yourself. Not only personal change, you know,
Right.
technological change and social change and demographic change. It's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. And so you feel like you need to slow down to get an iota of perspective and sanity. And so and of course there are various ways to do that. And sometimes it's preferable and healthy, and other times it's downright necessary.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to slow down.
Right. Right.
And meditation and mindfulness and yoga are excellent and they're helpful, but there are so many ways to just put on the brakes and get some perspective and take a deep breath and take a look around, literally and metaphorically. There are many ways.
Right. Right. Great. So we're going to take another pause, folks. We'll be back after a short break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back once more. You won't want to miss this last segment with Lesa Kingsbury and Ken Taub on mindfulness, yoga, COVID, and love. Love in a time of COVID. So we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks. Once again, I'm talking with Lesa Kingsbury and Ken Taub about mindfulness and yoga. and how it's become part of our mainstream in society. Um, and I wanted to just mention that, one of the things that intrigued me was that I just happened to stumble across this guy named Michael Bain, who I guess has become quite a phenomenon, director of the Penn program for mindfulness. So yeah, I mean, so we were talking about how, and Ken mentioned before the break, how there was a meditation room at the Pentagon. So I think that, so this Dr. Bain, he's a medical doctor, but basically, he also on the side, he was very involved in meditation and mindfulness. And then it became very clear that this was, he had some health issues, so he had cut back in his practice. But this became the center of his attention. And it's really become, a central part of a lot of, medical programs where, the doctors come in and they're not saying like, well, you should do this. They're like, can we do this? I mean, the stress of, medical practices. And I think even in businesses too, that people are realizing that this is something that can be an integral part. It's not a fringe thing. It's really could be integrated into and make, whatever we do better, on a daily basis. And I don't know, you've probably seen a lot in, in the over the years too, that, I'm sure some of this is pandemic related, but I do see a lot more stuff, on the internet, emails, saying, oh, 15 minutes of stress reduction, blah, 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 blah. Are you guys seeing a lot of this as well? And any thoughts on, I mean, also just, relaxation techniques, stress reduction, restorative yoga, is
Yeah, there's a ton. It's a whole aisle in the giant American supermarket,
mm-hmm,
which is not a good thing or a bad thing, but nothing succeeds like excess in America.
right.
So there's 1,001 options, and also as people have changed their lives and their lifestyle, and with the Great Resignation, it feels like for us, like every fourth person is becoming a yoga teacher. Why not? That sounds like a good job. I'll do that, and not just for some 22-year-old. So yeah, there's a lot of it, and like everything else, you certain things call to us, and they call to us in a certain way at a certain time in our lives, and you have to check out not only when you're young and 18 to 30, but even now at this point of our lives in middle age and older, you check out a few things to see what resonates with you. And because there's such a variety, you pick out your favorite can of soup, and then you've tried a few.
Right.
So
I see it all over the place. I see apps for breathing, apps for being calm. There's every app under the sun for creating your own yoga practice. It can be a bit daunting, actually. Like Ken was saying, nothing succeeds better than excess in America. And it's just so true. It's very interesting how everything got very commercialized with regards to yoga and how they monetize it. And some of it, like when it comes into mainstream, like being mindful, it's mainstream. It's very easy to water it down and lose some of the jewels that you can get in a very strong, deeply rooted, deeply researched practice. Meditation has been used for years dealing with pain and cancer. I mean, John Kabat-Zinn developed his own program up at the University of Massachusetts, I think it was.
Yeah.
And it became a global program to integrate into cancer, pain reduction, a whole array of things. And so something like that is where, I like the big research stuff, but that's just me, I'm less likely to go to a little app on my phone to teach me how to breathe. I want to go to an expert, but, so it can be a little tainted to see it everywhere, but at the same time, I'd rather see people being more peaceful and more mindful. And certainly, the great resignation has certainly said, okay, we're done having this puritanistic grind at the workstation. I want to balance. I want a quality of life if I can, and hopefully people find their way.
Yeah. I think the word you use is appropriate, daunting. There's just a lot of stuff to sift through. But what I like about your approach, both of you, is that it's accessible. There are things that you can do. You don't have to go to a course. There are things that you can do that integrate in your life. And it's complex, but it's also simple. I mean, it's also just taking the time to find something that's sustainable in your life, right? I mean, that's what you're looking for. As you pointed out earlier, Ken, small practices, small rituals, they don't have to be, traditional meditation. They're just ways that you can focus and, sort of take control back of your life and bring yourself, both closer to your center and at the same time make you connected outwardly to others. And speaking of which, let's talk about connecting to others. So how have you guys? As I said, this is Valentine's Day, so let's spend a little bit of the last part of it. Yes, you're laughing. That's good. It's always good when couples are laughing. Oh, we were talking in the break too about the essential component of humor in life. So what things are, to just take a page of mindfulness. What things are you mindful of, guys, in terms of your relationship over the years? Because it always changes, always issues, always problems. What things have you guys done to that, whether it's officially using your techniques or just your any kind of approach? What do you guys do?
I'll let my wife start.
That's always a good start approach, Ken.
Thank you.
She goes.
I would have to say that first off, I consider myself very lucky that I have such a great partner. So that starts off a couple really well. If you're well matched with someone, I mean, he always makes me laugh. He's always staying in touch one way or another, with little things, little notes, little cards. The sentiment is always very, very important. And so he makes me laugh. I hope I make you laugh sometimes. And so we all have our skill sets. And I think that the best thing is just to always do a little something every day to make sure that they feel appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the theme of what we're talking about is life itself and the flow of life and the rush of life and everything just happening with us despite us. It certainly, marriage and parenting and child rearing is life. And we certainly don't take what we've learned in meditation, Eastern philosophy, and yoga and overlay it onto our moment-to-moment life as a couple. That would both be very hard and somewhat artificial. We're rolling with it every moment like every other couple.
And we pray our yoga and meditation can jump in at a very opportune moment to save the day.
And like many couples, we count on each other's counterbalance. And she's more detail oriented and more patient by far. And I'm kind of more big picture and devil may care. So it makes for a nice balance. And it's very simple when people say, how are you guys doing, as a couple? And my reply for years is, she hasn't poisoned my soup yet.
You always end though with yet though, Ken.
Yeah. You have to stay with the yet. We have come to see, we've been together 26 years. As of a couple of days ago, we met on February 11th, 1996 in New York City and had a great first date. Over 26 years now, over a quarter century, the relationship can get richer. And we've had ups and downs, and we've had some pretty strong rough spots, like almost every other couple. But over time, the relationship can get richer. And there's not as much that has to be said. And like we started to talk about at the beginning of this program, the little stuff is what really matters. Little things that you can appreciate together become big things, become big, wonderful things. And now that our son's on his own and he's 23 and living in the city, that first big part of our parenting is over. But you're still parents. It's just changed. So it's changed a lot. But so yes, on this Valentine's Day, I think we're both glad that we have each other. Our lives are better because of one another. And even when we want to kill each other, we have so far refrained.
Right. Yeah, I
use your breath. Use your breath.
Yes,
Use your breath.
breath is important. There are, I think, there are some things that just do come to mind. I mean, I think that the sense of letting things happen, letting things flow, sometimes is, and letting things be. So I would say personally, a lot of things come down to, we all are, well, not all, but we're ambitious. We have strong egos. We have strong sentiments and opinions about things. And sometimes it's just let it go. Let it go. You're different, you have different opinions, you have different approaches. And, but there's a sense of letting go, and you could say forgiveness, but just letting life be, and recognizing that things, not everything has to, go your way at the moment, and that's fine. That's fine. So, for me, like the letting go has been important. And also what you mentioned, Ken, whether it's, whatever aspect of your life, and this is true of relationships, the little things and the little rituals really matter. And they matter, in some ways, I wouldn't say even more than the big things, but in disproportionately, in a cumulative way, they matter more. So this whole notion that we have of like what we, I guess, started with our kids and our spouses, like, well, we need quality time. Quality time is like, quality time is the time we have. That's what we have.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So listen, folks.
Also,
go ahead.
Also, there's this aspect of mindset that is, well, this is what I don't have. Right? How often is that? I mean, it's almost as if people like to complain as if it's a badge of honor that, oh, this is going wrong, all the drama, as opposed to looking at what's going right and enjoying the things that are good. You can always pick on people for the socks that are on the floor, or the pan that didn't get cleaned, or didn't you write that note, or didn't you do this? It's like ridiculous. You got to let that go. You have to look at what's going well instead of what's so keeping me in a box and keeping me very small. It's just let it go.
Right. So unfortunately, we have to let go of the show. We've come to the conclusion. Thanks, guys, for a terrific show. Another terrific show. I just want to tell folks, if they've missed our conversation with you guys today, you can listen to it as a podcast on voiceamerica.com. Just search for my show, 45 Forward. You can also listen to their February 8th podcast last year by going to the archives, and you can find it on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or my website, roelresources.com. So if you have questions, you can email me at ron.roel@gmail.com. Be sure to join us next Monday, 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll be talking with Dr. Francis Santiago Schwartz, distinguished immunologist and educator, who'll offer us a very clear-eyed view of how to navigate this brave new world of the endemic COVID viruses bravely and safely, especially in your older years. So that's going to be another great show. You won't want to miss it. Until then, folks, keep moving forward. 45 Forward.